Hail to thee, blithe spirit, bird thou never wert, that from heaven or near it pourest thy full heart in profuse strains of unpremeditated art.
Higher still and higher, from the earth thou springest, like a cloud on fire. The blue deep thou wingest, and singing still dost soar, and soaring ever singest.
In the golden lightning of the sunken sun, o'er which clouds are brightening, thou dost float and run, like an unbodied joy whose race is just begun.
Pale purple even melts around thy flight, like a star of heaven in the broad daylight. Thou art unseen, but yet I hear thy shrill delight.
Keen as are the arrows of that silver sphere, whose intense lamp narrows in the white dawn clear, until we hardly see, we feel that it is there.
All the earth and the air, with thy voices loud, as when night is bare from one lonely cloud. The moon rains out her beams, and heaven is overflowed.
What thou art, we know not. What is most like thee? From rainbow clouds there flow not drops so bright to see, as from thy presence showers a rain of melody.
Like a poet hidden in the light of thought, singing hymns unbidden, till the world is wrought to sympathy with hopes and fears it heeded not.
Like a high-born maiden in a palace tower, soothing her love-laden soul in secret hour, with music sweet as love which overflows her bower.
Like a glowworm golden in a dell of dew, scattering unbeholden its aerial hue, among the flowers and grass which screen it from the view. Like a rose embowered in its own green leaves, by warm winds deflowered, till the scent it gives makes faint with too much sweet those heavy-winged thieves. Sound of vernal showers on the twinkling grass, rain awakens flowers, all that ever was, joyous and clear and fresh, thy music doth surpass.
Teach us, sprite or bird, what sweet thoughts are thine, I have never heard. Praise of love or wine, that panted forth a flood of rapture so divine.
Chorus hymeneal, or triumphal chaunt, matched with thine would be all but an empty vaunt, a thing wherein we feel there is some hidden want.
What objects are the fountains of thy happy strain? What fields or waves or mountains? What shapes of sky or plain? What love of thine own kind, what ignorance of pain?
What objects are the fountains of thy happy strain? What fields or waves or mountains? What shapes of sky or plain? What love of thine own kind? What ignorance of pain?
Waking or asleep, thou of death must deem things more true and deep than we mortals seem. Or how could thy notes flow in such a crystal stream?
We look before and after, and pine for what is not. Our sincerest laughter with some heinous fraught. Our sweetest songs are those that tell of saddest thought.
Yet if we could scorn hate and pride and fear, if we were things born not to shed a tear, I know not how thy joy we ever should come near.
Better than all measures of the delightful sound, better than all treasures that in books are found, thy skill to poet were, thou scorner of the ground.
Teach me half the gladness that thy brain must know, such harmonious madness from my lips would flow. The world should listen then, as I am listening now.
To A Skylark by Percy Bysshe Shelley.
It's a poem about a bird that flies real high and sings real nice.
But it's also about more than a bird, because throughout the poem he makes a lot of religious references depicting the bird to be
God.
yeah, to be God. It's compared to be like a star of heaven, or like it's singing, and it's singing so wonderfully that it takes several comparisons to talk about just how worthy the bird is to listen to.
And he sort of achieves this comparison to God, or just to holiness in general, by interspersing stanzas where he compares the skylark to more earthly things, like where he compares it to a glowworm golden in a dell of dew, which, I mean, like a worm is about as close to the earth as you can get. It's something that you can easily pick up and grab and feel. And then he has other stanzas where he describes the skylark as like being in the golden lightning of the sunken sun, which these words like golden and lightning and sun, they're things that are like up in the sky, and like golden is very.
And they also portray heaven, and so the Skylark itself kind of represents all of these ideas about God and heaven and celestial lights, because it is so high up in the air that it is unattainable, but yet you know that it's there because you can hear it, and that is what God is
So,
in
like,
a lot of religious texts.
While it's an earthly thing, it's something that was born on the earth that you could technically like pick up and grab if you really wanted to. It's also like being a skylark, this bird that flies really high up in the air. It also has this intangibility to it, which, like as Travis saying, is very similar to like how people view God. How there's things that God does that are like tangible per se, that are like down on the earth, that you could say like that was God's doing, but at the same time, like, you can't go and shake hands with God.
So an important part of one of the stanzas, it's in the 7th one, is Percy writes, "What thou art, we know not, what is most like thee." And it depicts the bird to be as holy, but also as physical, as we've previously mentioned. And I think it's quite interesting that it picked a skylark to compare it to, because he didn't pick one that's necessarily like known for lots of things. Like, it's known for flying very high, but it's out in the middle of the day, and it's like a common bird. It's not anything super fancy. Like, he didn't say like, oh, like the peacock is like God or whatever, because it's super
Beautiful.
like beautiful and
represents
majestic
royalty.
looking. But then he didn't pick like a hawk. He's not trying to make the comparison that like God is powerful. He's talking about one that people see and watch in everyday life.
One of the stanzas that kind of attracted my attention to was the stanza where he asks all the questions, such as what objects are the fountains of the happy strain, what fields or waves or mountains, what shapes of sky or plain, what love of thine own kind, what ignorance of pain. Shelley appears to be asking the Skylark all these questions. It's like, where are you coming from? What causes you to sing like you do? Why do you fly so high where nobody can seem to obtain what your being is?
Compare that to prayer, almost, because he's not receiving answers from the skylark. The skylark's not flying down and saying like oh, well, nice to meet you, Percy. I'm a skylark. He doesn't do that.
The skylark is kind of unknowingly acting as a symbol. It's not it's not being kind of how people are when they're religious. It's not trying to act to be an example or to do justice or faith or anything. It's just kind of being itself.
Listening to the skylark as if it were like a religious thing, like he's learning from it. But the skylark doesn't know that it's doing that. The skylark isn't knowingly saying like, yeah, I'm your god. I'm gonna teach you how I sing. And so I think that implies certain things about Shelley's faith, because that provides the idea that maybe Shelley views God as more of a passive entity that like rules the world and like does these things, but not for the sake of being revered as a god, but rather just because that's what it does.
Throughout the poem, frequently there's a lot of description of springtime and greenness and I think it's supposed to represent the rebirth of something, because usually springtime, winter's first, so everything is really dormant and not active. But then springtime comes and everything just starts getting lush and very beautiful, as if it was reborn into something new.
I think this can also um, encompass Percy Shelley's relationship with nature, kind of using nature as a whole, not just the Skylark, to be imagery from God, but also something to be appreciated for itself. He talks about the moon and the sun and the pine and the surroundings that are for this bird, and they're also to be acknowledged and listened to. And as he's inspired by nature, he relates that to faith and the creation and depiction of God on earth.
So in that, in conclusion with those two ideas, which I think is perfect that we got there, Percy Shelley being one of the Romance poets, one of their big things was the appreciation of nature and being out in nature and seeing that nature. And a big thing was also their relationship to God. They all had interesting or different relationships to God. And so I think that's the biggest sort of indication. Like if you were to read this poem and never be told like what era it was from or who it was by, I think if you knew some things about the Romance era of poetry and you read this and you saw those ideas, you would clearly be able to tell that was the period that it belonged in, as it tied together that religious imagery and the author's own faith and his appreciation of nature, and he tied those together into one thing. In conclusion, Percy Shelley is a Romance poet.
And he wrote about a bird to connect spirituality and nature,
which fits under the big umbrella idea, the visualization and appreciation of nature.
And I think this can kind of format a theme that perhaps you can find things to learn from and listen to, whether religious or not, just in everyday life, and that there can be inspiration found from anything, and having a relationship with nature can embrace that. Thank you, large Coca-Cola truck.
Suddenly I have a great urge to drink an ice cold Coca-Cola.
Not a sponsor.
Ayo.